Yeah, hello, Dr. R. Michael Fisher. Just take a look out there, out that window, way in the background. Have a look. Yeah, see that little guy up there? Right there. Little girl, could be. It's my girlfriend up at Studio M. She's been sitting there, or he's been for 5 months, 3 months solid at Studio M where I am today. And I'm just gonna close the door here, get a little quieter. In the studio space. I said I was going to do another video or two from here, and probably more. Climbing into the dream chair. Yeah, the gull has been great because I been watching it for 3 months, and it's just exactly out the window where I'm sitting here now. It's a herring gull, and it seems to mostly be just sitting there, standing there, sleeping there. I keep thinking there's a nest on top of that flat roof and they're protecting, or changing off with a partner. I haven't seen that exchange happen yet, and I'm not sure the nest up there because I can't see. But this bird has an amazing vigilance to stay in this territory. Will often go off for a little bit, but not for very long and comes back. I don't know what it does at night, whether it's still sitting there. Um, I have a naturalist background and I'm an old birder, so I care about things like that, and I notice them as companions, as ancestors for us, and as guidance. So a great teacher for perseverance, one might say. And then one day I decided, well, why don't you draw it, them, and make a little card of some kind here that I give away or sell these little cards up here in the studio. It's something I can do when I don't feel like making a big piece, right, of art. I'll just make small stuff and it's easier to kind of handle and I can kind of finish in a fairly short time and I can sell these for really cheap. But you get an original art card, you don't get a reproduction and set of cards, for $8 or something. I sell these, $8 for an original piece of art. So I just kind of stylized it there, but I love that position. I love the forms of all the ovals and the bent overhead and just this black feather sticking out this way, the white sticking out the other way, the black legs sticking out the other way. There's just something so beautifully designed here. And yeah, I haven't done any. I think I did one other piece with the gull, but this is the one I kind of like. I just like the simplicity, and I'm not trying to do realism. I'm not, but yeah, it is representational. But most of my work is more abstract. I'll show a couple other pieces today, as well as maybe talk about some other things that are on my mind to share with you. So this is another piece I just created. It's a painting, an acrylic painting, and kind of 9 by 8 inch piece of cardboard, put gesso underneath, and then painted with the acrylics. And then I would go in, sometimes I'll go in with pencil crayon as well. So it's a mixed media, and I'll do some excess accenting or adding a tone of color or something with the pencil crayon because I can get really subtle interventions on an acrylic painting. As long as the acrylic paint isn't too shiny and plasticky, I can do that and get quite nice adjustments with the pencil crayon. And then sometimes I'll sit down and just start a doodle. I can't remember where I started. I think I just was up in this little space and I just started making a dark space and then shading. And I just went from there. The whole piece unfolded from that. I may have actually just made this. That's right. I'm just remembering now. I made this and then this, which sometimes when I don't know what to do when I'm coloring, and I use colored pencils a lot, I'll just make a shape like this and it's just a movement and it gets me involved, right, in connecting with the paper with that particular colored pencil. And then all of a sudden, I've kind of got a sense of going somewhere or I feel motivated. In other words, I don't feel motivated to do the piece. This is kind of probably the most important point here. And that's what art's a great teacher for that, like an art practice or an aesthetic practice, as I actually prefer to call these. because I'm actually not trying to make art. I'm not even trying to be an artist here. I'm very capable of doing all that and planning all that. I've done it. I've been a professional artist for, a decade or more back in the 80s, but and now I'm only interested in really like a poem you just, or a sense of feelings or a song that would come to your head. This is like something that just starts with something and then something and then another something, and there's a bunch of some things on the page, and then eventually something starts to happen. It's like humming a tune, and then all of a sudden you start getting into lyrics, and then you start to get into structure and design of the tune, and it starts getting more and more interesting and complex, and then using various shading techniques that I quite enjoy with the colored pencil that give different layers. So some of this layering up in here, even though it may look quite simple, that's like 4, 5, 6, 7 layers of lightly going over, making another light, cleaning out all the little white dots and sections, going back over, balancing it to get it even. Takes a lot of eye-hand attention. So one has to be really attentive in those kinds of manipulations. And other ones, I'm much more looser. I just lay it down once, I go and I just leave it. And I like the combination of leaving something loose, like these lines here, and some of that shading is not so fine compared to the fine grading of some of it. So some's loose, it's a little bit sloppy even, just a first go, and I leave it. And then some will have all these layers of intense care and attention. And I like the combination of that, or a little bit of raggy rawness with the refinement and the crafting of a particular technique or something that you're trying to achieve. And again, in the vein of the cards, I think I'll show a few more that demonstrate again. Here, I really don't know what I'm doing. So I just get this color. I feel like that color is interesting to me in the moment, and I'll just paint across, paint another, kept the brush going, dip in with more paint, then I'm going to just put more water on each brush, and then just keep brushing. And I created this simple, well, you're saying, what is that? Well, it's just a bunch of brush marks. And they're all a little bit the same, but they're all unique. And then at some point, I'm sitting there looking at that, and I go, oh, I have a sense that something could happen to that line. So the predictability, right? It's something predictable. And if I didn't put this white line across all of those, this would be just a predictable bunch of lines. And it wouldn't be that interesting. People go, well, it's kind of semi-interesting, but still kind of boring. So how do you make it more beautiful? You have to do something, and this is where the artist comes in, the creator, and this was very conscious later after I did, the original, which I didn't know where I was going to go, and I didn't know I would draw a line, and I didn't know a lot of things. And then I took a white pencil crayon and then did the soft shading off the white line, only moving in this direction and leaving this kind of more untouched. And all of that just creates a dynamic. I can't explain. It's just difference, right? And that's part of beauty. And if I can push beauty even higher, I'll get to what I call sacredness will start to appear. So this is all about qualities. So from boring to interesting, from interesting to beautiful, from beautiful to sacred. Here's a piece I just did yesterday. Pencil crayon again on this rough paper, which is dark blue paper, which I cut out from the back of a book. Sometimes the books have these really nice papers inside them that are holding the cover and the pages together. It's part of the binding process. And they're some of the nicest papers. So I'll go in and cut miserably. My wife can't stand it when I do that, but I just like, oh, that's good art paper. And then I just started by making the pencil crayon on the side, right? And put the lead down and then just rotate it slightly. And I think I started with that one right up there, that white one. And I had no idea where I'm going. I'm just noticing, I'm just again like doing a thing. And then that thing as a movement creates an effect. And I noticed the grain of the blue paper really comes through. It's really hard to I'd have to work pretty hard to cover all those blue spaces, and I didn't want to. I loved the texture. And then I said, well, let's make another one and another. And I just started. And then before time, you can see I brought in some other colors. And I just was doing this continual kind of piece that starts to feel, it's got this fuzzy quality, starts to look a little bit like a carpet or something like that, a hanging. And I like that. To me, I would to be able to take a 2D piece of paper so small and a pencil crayon so small, begin to create something, and all of a sudden, when you look at it, you get this affect, and reminders and memories. There's something kind of very comforting in this little drawing or coloring, as I prefer to call it. It's a coloring more than a drawing because I'm not drawing any lines, as you can see. I'm actually only coloring. I'm coloring in this particular movement, and I do that a lot. I don't use a lot of lines. I will use them now and then in my pieces, but mostly now in these abstract, expressionist, I call them visual poetic pieces. You get a lot of this. So I have hundreds and thousands, probably 1,000 in my whole studio here of small pieces with these kinds of spontaneous and creative creation making processes that I go through. And then you can see, I'll put in a variation, right? Like there's black dots there. So I break up the pattern. There is a pattern, white, this beige to a gold color. And then I would go back, white, beige, gold, beige. Now I'm going backward to repeat this pattern of line. And then to go back to the gold, but now I do a double gold all of a sudden. So this is where part of me inside is if I just repeat the same pattern, which is from this gold to that gold, right? It's that unit. I could just reproduce that continually and on and on. And if not, that would be very machine-like. That would be is what most machine designs would do, at least at the most simple without a lot of variation. And that's where it's interesting, but it's not that beautiful. And it's certainly not sacred for the most part when you just reproduce the same thing, same thing. The brain gets bored. We get visually uninterested. And I think nature is so interesting. It is that we have the creative capacity to constantly shift, change. Oh, change the pattern. Oh, only a single white instead of the double white. Oh, okay. And then, oh, I'm going to do a double gold there. Oh, back to the beige. Well, okay, but where's that going? Well, then I put another gold, and then I brought in another color in that end one, and then I just put one beige so that I could connect that beige color, as you can see, all the way across. So that one line connects them all in a different way all the way across. And of course, interrupts because I haven't done this before, right? I haven't done the move of they've always been consistent, same color, same vertical line. So this is competition. This is what artists do, really, when you're thinking artistically or aesthetically, working on this idea of, from boring to interesting to beautiful to sacred. Couple more. And this is a card I did basically with a piece that I had done on black paper quite a while ago, and then I brought it forward and put it onto the card. And then I went in and I said, oh, it needs something a little bit more. And so I ended up coloring in this blue toning. And then I added in this green blue toning across the top of that. And then I actually added in that. So that wasn't all in the original piece, which I did almost 2 years ago. And sometimes I'll do that. I save them, and then when I pick them up, I go, oh, that really needs something to take it from interesting to really beautiful or beautiful to something sacred. I need to add that extra piece. And so this one to me is starting to move into the sacred. I can't tell you how or why I know that. I just know it. I can feel it. I can feel the presence and the attention of things. You can kind of decide for yourself. So you see, I'm not dictating what you should feel or think in terms of these labels that I give art. And then you get a piece like this. This is a little tiny piece. It's like maybe, inch and a half by probably 5 inches. And that was just because I did this huge watercolor and threw paint all over and get very messy. And a lot of it's kind of ugly and even ugly, not even boring. It's just ugly. And I destroy a lot of it. Or I'll cut out a piece of a tiny piece. I go, oh, that's possibly an interesting little section there. So this is cut from a large watercolor with splattered paint all over it. And I just some interesting little pieces were there. And I said, oh, that's gorgeous. And so I just cut it out. It's like, yeah, it's really beautiful and interesting and feels like a little bit like a Japanese painting that was done or made. And you could even make up there's some kind of story or narrative in there that always adds a piece toward the sacred, moving just beyond beauty, right? You start to create a narrative and it evokes something like a narrative or a cultural memory or something archetypal in the deep psychological way of soul or whatever. I'm not saying this does all that. You might just see it as a couple blobs of paint, which all it is. But there's something about how I frame it. And so this is what artists also do. They take an accident, which this is, and they frame it. They frame a particular part and they exclude the other parts. Big part about being an artist is knowing what to exclude, not just what to make. And I like that practice. And that's called the via negativa approach. The approach to the negative, withdrawing, right? Taking things away from what you made, taking things way back, de-engineering them, subtracting to a minusio effect is what a term I created a few years ago. The use of, like sort of like doing the minimum to create the most kind of idea, but it's much more complex than that. So those are a few of my art pieces. Thanks for spending a little time with those. Lots around that I could share, but I think that's probably lots for the art end of today's talk. Ask me any questions for sure about these ideas of what I call fusion coloring compared to drawing, the use of Manuzio effect or this minimalizing effect, their use of accident. And what does it do for me? It's kind of an art care and an art cure at the same time. I find it very calming to me to work on these pieces. I love using my hands. I highly recommend hand-eye coordination kinds of activities when you're involved in the arts, whether it's playing an instrument or making art or building something and so on, where you get to use a creative aesthetic judgments and choices. So a lot of the times I'll even talk about these art pieces as like even those small little pieces. Um, there's like, 5,000 judgments or not really judgments, but they're 5,000 discernments. There's 5,000 choices. Maybe there's 10,000 in a larger piece. Yeah, I can feel I have to make those choices. And it's just like how deep the color is going to be, how not it's going to be soft. When is it going to start? Where is it going to stop? How much? How's that compared to the other color? Do I want another, do I want another piece of paper? Do I want to glue something on top of that drawing, coloring? Choices. And that is the healthiest thing I can think of what a good, healthy brain requires. So I'm 75 almost coming on, and I can see that I'm pretty bright and aware because I practice this every day, more or less, for hours. Never mind all the choices and decisions I make when I'm a writer. And I'll talk about my writer self a little bit in this video and a new book that I just picked up. That that 10,000 choices is kind of metaphoric for um, making mistakes and then making another choice, making a mistake, making another choice, making a good move. Oh, that cascades to make another good move. It's like, I guess it'd be like playing chess is kind of similar, right? It's like it's all about these choices and moves and matters. But I'm not competing with anybody. I'm sort of competing in a subtle way, very subtle with the materials, with the limitations of what the crayon can do compared to a watercolor, or should I shift to acrylic, or should I shift to another medium or another art material? Those are real questions, and they are part of a struggle. They are part of a competition against, in a way, very subtle, not really against, the limitations. And so making choices within limitations. That's the trip. That's the teaching. That's the wisdom, if I had to pass on wisdom. Making tens of thousands of choices and allowing yourself to practice that every day within limitations of something, of an environment, of a material, of yourself. Well, I'm tired now. I don't feel like doing that. Oh, that's a limitation. What are you going to do with that? And so maybe that little movement of the pencil crayon on a piece of dark blue paper, whoa, it excited something in me. It took me out of that little depressive enclosure of, oh, I don't really feel like doing anything. It's not going to look very good if I do it anyway. I don't have any good ideas. And then you get into comparing, you get into, well, I'll never sell this, and you can get into just, oh, this is going to remind me that I'm not a good artist like some artists that can sit down and do this and do that, and you're comparing. So you can see, right? It's like a hugely psychological, philosophical, spiritual process to do art in the way I'm speaking about it today. There's obviously many other ways to do art um, that are also perhaps enjoyable, entertaining, or challenging. I've given you my view, which I think is a very holistic, integral approach. And let's leave it there and move on to writing. So, and have followed a couple of my videos, probably little bits in the last year, I've been thinking of pretty seriously writing autobiography or set of volumes of memoirs. I know I'll need more than one to write a memoir. I have probably so much, and I have so many journals, about 300 journals sitting right now in front of me on the other side of this computer. And they're all sitting there, and I've lined them all up from 1979, yes, to date. And they're just sitting there calling me, are you going to utilize these journals, all that writing you do as a practice? It's really a contemplative, reflective practice I do every day. Again, very rare I miss. There's definitely been months or times or years where I don't do so much, but generally for all those years since 79, very close part of my life, just like these spontaneous creation makings and art making. So yeah, I'm always thinking about, but that's words, right? It's words and text. It's very different than working with image, making something with your hand. But yes, you are writing with your hand, and most, 99% is all handwritten. The odd time I'll type for a journal entry, but it's this handwriting. It's picking up just the simple, pen, which I go through tons of pens because to find the right kind of pen, I've had to search and unfortunately never could find a really expensive pen that I really liked that had refills. I always end up with these really inexpensive, unfortunately, plastic Bic pens, but they actually write the nicest for me and my hand and the paper I use. So I have to be sensitive to that. My body will not be happy if it's working too hard, and it would be easy for me to come up with arthritis and all kinds of joint problems for all the printing I do. So I print, very fine tuned. I can show you from one of my journals. This would be a typical journal. 240 pages that would last 6 to 8 weeks, and then I have to get another one. So I'm producing probably 6 to 10 pages a day. Um, Now you might go, oh, well, 6 to 10 pages a day, maybe that's not so much. But if you look at how I write and how small I write, um, yeah, there's a lot of words in here. Um, and I love that. I love the articulation. I like the detail of that compared to the artwork, right? So here I'm balancing. So what I'm talking about now is balancing that creative right brain hemisphere most of us have. We all have it, but some of us, for most of it, opt towards our creative, gestalt, environmental, creative, artistic side. The left brain is the more logical, linear. What can I do and how can I get there and produce something functional, more logical, rational, right? So this is mostly for the left brain, not totally because, I think I'll show you lots of pages are just straight text, but I do every once in a while, I'll break into images or put in a piece of some writing I did, and then you can see I do drawings and I start to connect things, and that's my artistic side, connecting ideas, synthesizing, going, oh, that's related to that. Oh, that's something I do want to remember, if I go into doing some writing later. And so they're very active, but often, like really most times, I don't go back to the journals. I think, and I just start writing an article or something, and this will same with the memoirs. Um, I just want to be free. I don't want to have to, always go back. But it's good to go back because there's really good ideas in there. And a lot of them I forget. Like I can tell you, especially as I've gotten older, stuff I'm recording, I forget. Just like sometimes I'll forget that I actually did that art piece and go, I don't remember that art piece. Most I do, but there's some, and that's kind of an interesting experience to go, wow, you created that, but you don't remember it. Um, so that's just all very interesting. And then, typical again as both an artist and as a scholar and writer and researcher, that it's good to keep reading other people's work too and looking at other people's work and artwork. So I also do that. And I just got this book here, The Make Believe, and it's a memoir. That's why I got it from somebody I don't know, Hannah Murray, an actress, apparently quite well known in British UK, etc. A memoir of magic and madness is the subtitle. So magic and madness, yeah. My artistic side, my scholar side is very interested in those terms. My psychological interest, my philosophical interest. What is magic anyway? What is this thing we call madness? And how are they related? And she talks about her journey. And at the end, just I was noticing I haven't read the book yet, so I just got it at the bookstore, which is just around the corner here, which is very nice. It says beautifully written, and brilliant, fast flowing, deeply felt and observed. Hannah Murray is a writer of tremendous skill and fearlessness. End quote. Okay, well, that grabs my attention. I got a feeling this is going to be an interesting book, and I think I saw a little excerpt on it online, and that's why I went to order it. It's somebody who goes into their own spiritual slash healing process and gets lost in it. She has a very, I think, interesting foreground title there. You can see at the top. Yeah, pretty interesting way to introduce your book, right? With a couple potent little quips. I lost my mind, I lost myself, I got them back, but they're different. Yeah, that's a great hook, right? That's what you call a hook in writing. And how do you get people to really attend? Well, that's a good hook. So I'm interested in I both copy just as an artist too. I'll copy things at times, but I shift and make them different, right? So I've always learned to do that way back because I wasn't one of those super talented artists that could draw anything, no, and have it in your mind, right? And then draw it and put it on paper. Oh, no, no. I have to work hard. I have to see references, pictures. So reference. So for writing my memoir, I've now got a book of memoir that I can write from. And this ought to be interesting. The second title is a gripping lyrical memoir that asks, how far would you go to find enlightenment? Of course, that interests me greatly. Enlightenment, as much as there's a troubling world, you probably know from my videos, if you watched any of them over the last 8 years, but also my work for the last really 45 years, I've been interested in enlightenment in some kind of way. Enlightenment. And of course, what does that mean? It means how do we move and change to different levels of consciousness, to to even this evolution from something boring to something interesting to something beautiful to something sacred. That's the shift. It's a shift in qualities. It's a shift in a philosophy of quality or qua, which I have been playing with over the years and never did any serious writing about it. That's something you might find that I do in the future is before I die is try to arc out this philosophy of qua. And it's for quality. And it's capital Q really for me. And I know there's different, some people have played with the word qua, but they're not using it like I do. And I use this very artistic, scientific, and moralistic integration. Artistic, aesthetic, to this moral, to this scientific and natural nature. Is that the real? And the reality to me is going to be constructed somewhat in all of those, but they're all interested in quality. It's just different ways to get to quality and different modalities, you might call it, or different disciplines that work to understand truth, reality, capital R, capital T, and to quality, capital Q. Of course, those are all very controversial, right? It's like, well, what does that mean? Who's going to says so? Who proves it? Isn't it all relative? Well, no, I don't think it's all relative. A lot is relative, and a lot is about reality, truth, and quality are definitely determined by your culture, your history, your biological being, your environment. I'm a holistic thinker, so I'm not throwing any of those factors or vectors out, but it's been my long quest. Just like with my art, as I'm showing you today, there are things that are just universal processes and they produce universal qualities. It doesn't matter what tribe or ethnic group you're from, there'll be slight variations with all that, but those are surfaces of difference. When you get down to the formative differences, and that's a little bit of my philosophical closing here, I'm interested in form over content. So I'm less interested in the content of diversity into the integration of the deeper form that's very pretty stable and consistent, predictable, and deep motivating forces. And yes, those are not going to come out in totally predictable way because of all those surface differences of culture, environment, point in history, language differences, and so on, and race, class, gender, and so on and so on. So again, I'm interested in all those possible vectors, but I do have a deep interest in the universal, because I think we're all, in that sense, we're just living beings, and we're in a cosmos that's got some rules and principles that are pretty universal as well. And you don't have to be a physicist or a chemist or biologist to know that these principles are operating. You see them, you can recognize a human being anywhere in the world, and it doesn't matter what all their diverse content and elaborations and costumes are, and rituals and customs, etc., politics, etc., you recognize that's a human being. And this is, again, you recognize life more or less. It's easier. Some places in the world, that reality of what's life, what's living, what's not. And indigenous peoples will often teach it's all living. Um, so that's a little bit of the philosophy behind my work today from the Studio M studio. I'm glad you could join me, and I'll probably do another video from here at some point. Let me know if you're interested in anything particular that you want me to go into more. Okay?